What's up, whodat Nation? It's Chris Roswoglu from the Straight Up Saints podcast, presented by Boot Crew Media and Hornitos Tequila, the official tequila of Boot Crew Media. If you haven't already, make sure to go check out the recap podcast where I broke down the Saints' blowout victory over the Packers. What went right, not much that went wrong outside of a couple of drops here and there. It was just a really fun overall show just to have the vibes up and be able to just talk about one of the more impressive wins we've seen from the Saints organization over the last couple of years. And then I also broke down the Marshall Lattimore extension, which, believe it or not, actually broke the news, at least while I was recording. So you got my literally raw emotion to that extension. Now, one of the things I talked about on the podcast and the topic for this particular video is Jameis Winston and what transpired on Sunday afternoon in Jacksonville. In late April of 2020, remember, guys, the Saints signed Jameis Winston to a one-year deal. The former number one overall pick was mocked, labeled as a bust, and considered nothing more than a backup quarterback in this league. All the talk about him getting LASIK surgery was never positive. All your favorite analysts would sit there and crack jokes about him seeing stop signs and him seeing trees he's never seen before, and just basically laughing at the fact that Jameis Winston was a quarterback in this league, quote-unquote, playing blind. And that basically was all there was to it. They would make fun of the LASIK surgery, and they laughed at the idea of it potentially fixing his career and getting him on the right track. And how about the idea of pairing him with an offensive genius in Sean Payton, the man that's had success with Drew Brees for 15 years, the man who found a way to make Taysom Hill a very, very serviceable football player and even get a 3-1 record with him as a starting quarterback, or the guy that was able to go 5-0 with Teddy Bridgewater, albeit the Saints offense only had 13 points in one game, 12 points in another, or the fact that Luke McCown, yes, Luke McCown, the brother of Josh McCown, who not many NFL fans know, albeit lost in the one start he ever made, took Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers wire to wire. So the thought of a guy like that who has had so much success with quarterbacks, no, nobody gave him credit. Nobody thought maybe Sean Payton can have some success with Jameis Winston outside of Saints fans, obviously, who were hoping and praying that would be the case. And how about the idea that Bruce Arians was a little bit responsible for Jameis Winston's turnovers? Yeah, sure, I've heard a couple of people say it from time to time, and people mention that Carson Palmer, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck have had career high in interceptions with Bruce Arians being their play caller. But when the Buccaneers win the Super Bowl the following season, that gets ignored. No one really talks about it. And yet Tom Brady actually did have 12 interceptions, including 3 in the NFC Championship game, but it got ignored because of the final result. So the idea that Bruce Arians maybe played a part in the fact that Jameis Winston had 30 freaking interceptions in one season, it was ignored. Because why? They won the Super Bowl. And why? Because Jameis had a turnover history. Is that really true? Because in the first 4 years of Jameis Winston's career, he averaged 14 and a half interceptions per season. Now, that isn't a beautiful mark. You obviously don't want it to be 14 and a half. You would prefer under. But going from 14 and a half to 30 in one season, there's obviously something wrong. But that got ignored. Jameis Winston was to blame. And how about the idea that Jameis Winston could learn a thing or two from one of the greatest quarterbacks to play this game in Drew Brees, and learn that it's not always about making the big play. It's about making the right play, taking checkdowns, using slants, being able to move the chains without thinking that I need to make this throw down the field for us to win the game. Because we all know Jameis Winston can do it, but it doesn't necessarily have to do it. And that is a big difference. And being able to sit there and learn from Drew Brees and seeing how he operates, whether it's his film study, whether it's how he operates with the offense under center, and just being able to respond to a negative play and see how he bounces back, that's important. Yet for some reason, didn't really get taken into account much. And how about the fact, not opinion, fact, that Jameis Winston's support system in Tampa Bay was never as great or as strong as it will be in New Orleans. Now, this isn't to say that Jameis Winston has fixed everything, but Tampa Bay's run game was really non-existent until the 2020 season, when you saw that you had a Ronald Jones and a Leonard Fournette and you were able to move the chains via the ground game. You didn't get much with Tampa Bay. Sure, everyone loved Doug Martin years ago, but that didn't last very long. And the rest of the ground game just wasn't successful. Peyton Barber is not a running back that you write home about. And how about the accountability? It was always Jameis's fault. He'd get thrown under the bus immediately, all time and time again. And it wasn't never the coach's fault. It was never the GM's fault. And granted, Tampa Bay has done an excellent job of restructuring their organization. And they draft really well now. Now they're able to sign key free agents because of Tom Brady and the emergence and people just wanting to play with TB12, and rightfully so. But at the time when Jameis came in, it was a lot of pressure because you're talking about a former number one pick who was lights out at Florida State. And lights out in college, I should say, and a guy who was so athletic that he could actually play really well for Florida State's baseball team as well. And he goes to Tampa Bay, and you immediately want him to save a franchise that was irrelevant for nearly a decade. That's a lot of pressure for a young guy. And when there isn't someone to take that pressure off, that hurts. And how about the coaches? I mentioned Bruce Arians, but Bruce Arians is a hell of a coach. Albeit he has turnover-prone issues with his quarterbacks, he is a really, really creative offensive game plan guy, and he is someone who gets his players up. He's won everywhere he's gone. But was Dirk Cutter really the guy for Jameis Winston? Was Lovie Smith, who's famously known for a Tampa 2 defense, going to fix Jameis Winston when he plays offense? That made no sense. And yet those weren't really people who got blamed for the potential downfall of a Jameis Winston. And this doesn't mean that Jameis Winston should get off scot-free. It should never happen that way. He should get criticism, and he did. But it's about being able to just kind of balance it. And that's something that wasn't happening. And the Saints signed Winston this offseason to an incentive-based deal to kind of just re-up on their relationship and see if they can maybe catch lightning in a bottle. And as soon as everyone heard that there was a quarterback competition going around, national media was out on Jameis. How could a former number 1 pick struggle to beat out a tight end mass as a quarterback, they said. And mind you, Taysom Hill was 3-1 as a starter, and you could say whatever you want about him, but I don't think he's a tight end mass as a quarterback. I just think he's a really good football player who happens to want to be a quarterback. Well, Winston won the job. He was voted as a team captain. And on Sunday, September 12th, 2021, week 1 of the 2021 season, Jameis Winston showed that you can make the most out of a second chance. He didn't air the ball against the Green Bay Packers secondary as much as you like. And sure, he did have that beautiful touchdown pass to Deontay Harris that kind of just put the exclamation point on one of the best wins we've seen from the Saints in a couple of years, from the last couple of years. But he didn't look like the next coming of Tom Brady. He didn't look like Patrick Mahomes. And that is totally fine. He looked like someone who was enjoying his time on the field. And you could tell a guy who missed a full year of starting all of his time at Florida State, starting all 5 years at Tampa Bay, albeit there was a time where Fitzpatrick had some run. He looked grateful for the opportunity, grateful to represent Louisiana, represent the city of New Orleans, and just get the chance to show that he can still play in this league. And he also showed people that it really isn't how you start, but how you finish. And this doesn't mean this is the end of his story. And obviously he has so many more weeks to go, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But there is something to be said about a guy who's been kicked around the last 2 years to have that kind of a game in his first one back against a really formidable opponent in a game that nobody was picking the Saints. Check ESPN, NFL Network, whatever you like, go check. They were picking the Packers. And they weren't just picking the Packers. They were picking the Packers big. And I was someone who picked the Packers to win. I had them winning 27-24, and I was wrong, and I was glad to be proven wrong. But I wasn't one of those people telling you it was going to be a blowout win for the Green Bay Packers. And as for Jameis, what really impressed me was the decisions that he didn't make on Sunday. And I know you're probably sitting there saying, what the hell are you saying? No, I'll say it again. It was the decisions that Jameis Winston didn't make on Sunday that impressed the hell out of me. He took the checkdowns when they were there. He scrambled with his feet when he had to. And when he had all day to throw and he had a chance to take a deep shot, but the defense didn't give him that opportunity because there was great coverage, he didn't force it. He threw the ball out of bounds. And that's something he hasn't done for the last couple of years and something that he knows he has to get better at. And we are seeing day by day, week by week, him starting to take steps towards becoming a more efficient quarterback. And that was really important for Jameis Winston. And I know it's just one game, but Winston's performance needs to be given credit. And it could all turn south next week when they play the Panthers, and that's totally possible. And I won't dismiss that because he could turn bad next week, and I could just sit here saying, man, I just kind of jumped the gun. And that is possible, and that's part of the business. You're in a reactionary business. We all react. That's why we call them Monday morning quarterback, Monday morning overreactions, whatever it might be. But when you talk about what you see and what needs to be said after, I think for this 1 week, Jameis Winston deserves an apology. He deserves an apology from the fans who mocked him and said the highlight of his career was stealing crab legs and throwing 30 interceptions for a season. Because don't think we don't remember the 30 for 30 jokes. Don't think we don't remember the crab legs jokes that Robert Griffin III, for some stupid reason, is still making. He deserves an apology. He also deserves an apology from NFL analysts who call him a bust year in, year out. Yet they'll sit there on TV and they'll tell you Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold still need another year when they're out there just turning over the ball at an alarming rate. And by the way, I'll mention, because people might think that I just, shot a stray at Daniel Jones, he is the second fastest player to have 40 turnovers in his career. Second fastest. And no, Jameis Winston's not number one. I just want to know where the energy is for a guy like Daniel Jones, because people couldn't wait to get Jameis Winston out of Tampa and say he was a bust. Apparently, Daniel Jones can fumble as much as he wants, and that's okay. But more importantly, I want an apology if I were Jameis Winston, and he won't do it because he's honestly mature to the point where he doesn't care. about that outside noise. But more importantly, you want an apology from any QB-needy team that overlooked him in 2020. There were teams that needed him. Maybe they didn't need him to start. Maybe they needed him as a backup, but they didn't think about it. And yes, I know Jameis Winston chose the New Orleans Saints, but the New Orleans Saints did not have much cap space. A team could have potentially blown away Jameis Winston with an offer and kind of gone the Tennessee Titans route where you revitalize Ryan Tannehill's career. Maybe you have success with Jameis Winston. And they could have did it. And they didn't. But I'll tell you this. Those teams who probably won't apologize for making the mistake in 2020, Jameis Winston keeps playing the way he did on Sunday, they'll soon be asking for forgiveness